everyone. I'm Pamela with Pixelz. Today you're joining us for the AI in e-commerce image editing webinar. I'm the content marketing manager here at Pixelz, and before our guests join us, I'm going to get to a little housekeeping. So first of all, on the right-hand side of your screen, you can see a chat. Feel free to say hello in there. Let us know where you're joining from. And then you'll also see a tab that says Q&A, and that is where you can drop all of your questions throughout the webinar, and we'll try and get to them throughout the webinar. And if not, we'll answer all of them at the end as well. All right. So I think that's all our housekeeping notes. Oh, one last note. This webinar will be sent out as a recording as soon as it's finished. So with all of that said, let us be joined by our two guests today, CTO at Pixelz, Janus Matthesen, and Carlos Rullán, our Chief Product Officer. Come on in, guys.
Hello.
Oh.
Everybody.
How are you guys doing today? You ready to talk about AI?
Always.
Yep.
Okay, great. Let's start. Janus, can you just tell us a little bit about yourself, how AI fits into why you're here?
Sure. Yeah, so as you said, my name is Janus Matthesen, and I'm the CTO of Pixelz. I'm also one of the co-founders of Pixelz, so I've been here basically since 11 when we founded the company. The whole reason for us creating Pixelz was actually before that with the other founders, we were running an e-commerce agency and building an e-commerce platform, building web shops and so on. And basically we saw again and again and again that when we were done with the shops, we had challenges with the images. It didn't match the great look of the site. And that's the whole reason why we stepped into this. Yeah, and from the beginning, we approached the whole retouching of images from a technical perspective. And soon that led us into AI that we'll be talking about today.
Awesome.
And I'm happy to be here.
We're happy to have you. All right, Carlos, give us a little background on yourself.
Yeah, I'm Carlos. I'm the Chief Product Officer here at Pixelz, and I've been in the company for 1.5 years, so nothing to compare to you, Janus. You've been here for a while now. And I have a background in product management, focusing on content and how to display content in the best way, for example, at Zalando, but also in post-production and post-production management of teams, also at Zalando and Mango, and even some high-end retouching experience. And here at Pixelz, I'm driving innovation and our product forward. And one of the key aspects of this currently is AI and content creation. So,
yeah, we'll get into a little bit of what you're working on later in the webinar. All right, so before we jump right in, we have a little question to ask the audience here. How many AI tools would you say you use in your daily work life? We're just looking for, throw out a number there. I would say, it's such a hard, I know what a difficult question is, but my initial reaction is to say that I probably only use 3. But okay,
my
we've
guess
got 2,
would be
1.
that you're probably wrong. I think you're using a lot more.
Yeah. This is really interesting. We've got 1, we got 2, we got 3, 1 or 3 at most.
Is Pixelz counting as 1 or several?
I think we would say Pixelz count. If you're using Pixelz, then you're at 1. Okay. But I mean, if you're using Grammarly, ChatGPT, Netflix, technically, is it an AI tool? It depends, but right, it uses AI. So there's a lot of things out there that actually, more than I know, I'm sure. I think that is probably, not that there is a correct answer, but that is probably the correct answer, is that we are all probably using a lot more than we know. So with jump in Did I cut out there for a second? Sorry,
You did?
guys. I'm back. With that being said, let's get started with the AI topic. Janus, can you give us like the simplistic Cliff Notes version of what AI means?
Sure. I come from the world where we create code, and the way we traditionally been doing that for years and years now is that we sit down and we figure out what results we want to get to, and then we put up all the code that will get us to that result. And basically, you could say in the basic form, we are writing a lot of if this, then that, else this, and so on. These kind of statements that will lead to the result we want to get to. In many ways, basically, AI is code in exactly the same way. But what we do with AI is instead of me writing those statements and getting to the result, I start with the results and I basically give a computer all the results I want to get to. And then in the simple way again, you could say an AI is basically really a huge amount of if this, then that statements that they will go through. We sometimes hear about these AI models having billions of nodes, and that's basically billions of these if statements, you could say. So basically, I would say AI is also just software. It's just made in a different way, you could say. And reflecting a little bit back to your question, I also think that it is just software means that in most AI tools, there's a part that's the AI, but there's also different parts that is the normal code. And that's also why I say I think we're using a lot more AI than we realize, because behind the scenes, stuff is going on that is actually AI.
Yeah, and I think that's true for us at Pixelz as well. We say we use AI, but we also use a lot of other things as well to speed up the image editing process. So let's talk, we're here to talk about AI in image editing. So let's jump into how we actually apply that in image editing, specifically in our use case. How are we using AI for image editing?
Yeah, I think as most companies, we started out with the more simple stuff, what I call classification and segmentation.
And by classification, I think, Janus, you mean, for example, how difficult it is to, or how difficult we predict is going to be to retouch this image, or if there is a hanger on the image and then maybe we need to put it in a different workflow, right? Or if there is any prop that needs to be cleaned up, something like this, right?
Yes, very much. Yeah, exactly. And then later on, we moved on to the more now generative AI is a word we use, but at least the AIs that are more changing the image and actually making edits to the image.
Yeah, like masking, for example, creating a try map and then a mask, or even doing color matching automatically thanks to AI. I think we also do background extensions. And the most recent one was the ghost mannequin, right? Where we compose all the images of the pack shot together just with AI. I think that's pretty useful.
Yeah, exactly.
And are all of those classified under Gen AI when we talk about anything that's altering the image? Do we always classify that as generative AI, or is that standard AI?
To be honest, I think AI in itself is not a very specific term. I think a lot of technical people would be talking about different, more specific things like machine learning or deep learning or large language models and so on. And generative AI is as little precise, I would say. So I think the way the world perceives generative AI is generally AIs that generate new outputs, you could say, rather than classify stuff and say, this is probably something you need to do something about or whatever. So I would say the generative AI is as a technical person, it's not a word I'm super fond of, but it is a word we're using now.
And Carlos, you listed off some of the things, tools we call AI tools, we call them, that use AI, background extension, ghost mannequin, color matching. But I think it's important to note, I think, for everyone, that these aren't 100% AI, right? Some of these things are automations or algorithms. Can one of you explain a little bit about what all of these things mean in image editing?
Yeah, I mean, we use a mix of everything here, right? The purpose is to replace human manual work with some kind of automation. If we can do this with simple automation that could start with an action in Photoshop or script or some algorithms or code, like Janus was mentioning before, if then, and then we do that, right? Take the simple approach. But we can also look into how we can do this more clever, or if they need, we need to make decisions based on the content, then we will use AI. But as you mentioned, we use a hybrid approach in combination of different kinds of automations, including AI. That's one of the automation methods. But of course, a human in the loop, because even these automations are not perfect. And for the level of quality that we're used to and our customers expect from us, we need to put a human in the loop for now.
Maybe I can also just add, sometimes I actually discuss this with our head of the R&D team, and I will come with some idea and say, hey, Sebastian, couldn't we use AI to do this? And very often he also he has a PhD in computer vision, and that's of course AI, but also all kinds of other traditional coding algorithms. And very often he will look at me and say, of course you could do it with an AI, but it will probably be 1,000 times more expensive and slower to run and a little worse than if we just use this super complex mathematical algorithm that someone came up with maybe in the 80s or something like that. So it's also about choosing, of course, having the knowledge and then choosing the best tool for whatever task you're trying to solve.
So AI is not always the solution.
Not at all. Not at all.
Or maybe not the best one. I think the simple solution is more clever.
Let's real quick, while we're talking about some of the tools we have for AI, could one of you walk us through what a workflow for one image would look like? Like, how many touch points? Does AI do all the work first and then it's sent to a person for editing there? Or is it mixed up? Like, what do these steps look like? Maybe Carlos can take this one.
I think it depends also. As you know, in our system, we break down the retouching process in different steps, right? And I'm not going to go deep there, but this also facilitates how we train AI, right? We know the input in one step and then the perfect output, but it's a combination. For example, if we do simple masking, maybe we do everything with an AI. And that's it. The quality of this AI is good enough, and then it goes to a different step that's background cleaning, and maybe that's fully human because we already have a selection for the background. So next step is fully human. Then color matching, that's an automation. Maybe we select so that's the color that we need to match to, and the garment, we click on that, and then an AI does the mask. But there's some kind of automation. So it's an hybrid one. Higher you need the quality, then probably there's less AI involved and more human touch. Like, for example, when we do editorial, right, it relies more on the human creativity and decisions and subjectivity. So it's less automation and more human. So it depends. I cannot give you a straight answer for this.
So but to answer the question, throughout one image's image editing cycle, it could be a mix constantly between that editing process, between AI, automation, and human. It's all interspersed. So
exactly. As we mentioned before, it's an hybrid approach. So we will use the best technique and automation or manual work depending on the job that needs to be done, right? So it's always a combination, an hybrid approach.
Yeah.
I think as well, part of what we found out pretty early on is that it's extremely hard to make an AI that will, cover 100% or even 99%. And the whole process is, when you start to look at all the details, it's very, very complicated. But so basically, if we had to do, let's say that it worked in the way that the AI would start by doing some retouching and then a human would do the rest or whatever, then we are missing out on a lot of pieces, you could say. So I would say by splitting it up and being more specific on what kind of edits we're doing at any given step, we have the ability to say, okay, we can create an AI, but it will only work if we know that A, B, and C is already done. And then we can set up our system so A, B, and C will be done, and then the AI kicks in, and then a human can take over, and maybe at step Y or whatever, the AI comes in again. So I think that's also part of why we managed to get our AIs in and work for us well, is that we have all these breaks, you could say, and simplified tasks instead of one huge, really complicated task.
Yeah, and that rolls us right into like what we wanted to talk about next, which is this part of how we use AI is a hybrid approach, as you just explained. And could you just explain that a little bit further of how you found that this approach worked best?
Yeah.
Back in the early days.
Yeah, so actually a lot of why we moved into the way of working that we do today by splitting things up came from basically a need for training people, for onboarding new people and having them start working and not having to wait like half a year or 1 year before they got the experience to actually provide value. So it kind of started with that we wanted to cut it into more simple steps. And then once we started seeing that succeed, then all of a sudden, we probably had an idea about it before, but we also realized, hey, some of this is actually really, really simple, and we could probably automate that. And that's where we started. So in the old days, we actually had people looking at the images and saying, this is a hard image, this is a easier image, and whatever. And we need that to calculate the time we need to edit the image, and we need that to plan our production. So that was the thing. Someone was sitting there clicking those buttons. And then we realized that was one of the tasks that we could actually get an AI to do. But I think where it really, really became interesting was that we also realized that we don't have to get to 100%, even within those simple tasks. And I call them simple, but again, when you really go into them, they're not that simple. So an example is our masking. Our first version of masking had a success degree, you could say, how many masks were good or were perfect, of 20%. Today we are between 75 and 80%. So that evolved a lot over time. But even today, we are not 100%. And we quite often we test out different algorithms that comes out, and Adobe comes out with a new version every now and then, and we test it out, and it's also not perfect. But because we have this hybrid approach, we can let the AI do the mask. Then we can, to begin with, we had humans looking at all the masks and again rate if there was mistakes in them. Today we actually have an AI that also helps us with that, and will classify some of the masks, not all of them, because it's not good enough for that. And then in the end, we have a human quality assurance step where we have humans looking at the images and saying, hey, we need to fix this. This one can go along, and so on. And that allows us to use this masking process. Our clients need very close to 100%. They can't live with fingers being cut off or ears being cut off on their models and stuff like that. So we need to get very close to 100%. And we can, if we just use the AI, we couldn't get to that. But because we put that human in the loop, then we can start getting the benefits of the AI way before. Because I think even for something like masking, where there's so many teams around the world working on this, I think it will still be at least a considerable amount of years before we'll have that perfect masking algorithm.
And it's interesting that you tell that story, Janus, because that's something, masking, that we've been working on for a long time, and it's still getting near perfection. And then Carlos, you're now working on testing out some new projects that uses, I don't want to call it new AI, generative AI isn't exactly new, but the way it can be used is probably new, and the advancements are new. So I want us to be able to talk a little bit about now, like, what our process is at Pixelz and how we approach, a ghost mannequin is relatively new. How do we get to the point where we can move new AI technology into existing workflows? And does that break our workflow, or how do you approach it?
I think first we need to identify a problem that we want to solve, right? For example, the ghost mannequin that we mentioned before, we look into what was more time consuming for us at Pixelz to do, what required more manual work, and how we could save time. And this is how we came up with this problem that could be solved. And because it's ghost mannequin and we need to make decisions every time that we see this composition of two images, a simple script would not help solve this problem, or not good enough. Therefore, we need an AI. And as mentioned before, and we isolate this step on the production chain, and we know how an image comes, or in this case, two images, right, for the composition, then how it should be at the end. And we use this to start training this AI. And when we have a good enough model, let's say maybe for the masking at the beginning was 20%. I don't remember exactly now how it was for this one, but when we decide it's good enough, then we start live testing. And but then we also need to convince people to start using this, right, and to implement this. So there's a change management as well on the team, and how we can make them use this new tool, because at the end, AI is just an automation tool, and we start training it or using our retouchers to use these 20% good enough images to go further. And then we have better images, and we can train the AI. This is in the case for optimizing. But we could also look at other problems, right? Things that we are currently not solving for our customers. And a good way to solve that problem could be AI. Let's say product tagging, meaning describing images. So we have 4, 5, 6 images of a product coming to Pixelz for retouching, and we have all the visual information of this product. So we could use this opportunity to describe the image, describe what it is. It's a short sleeve white t-shirt, for example. We can do that visually with AI. So that could be a way of using this to expand our services. Yeah, I think these two use cases, right? So focus on things that we can optimize or expand our existing services. This is two ways to implement it.
And maybe adding to that, Carlos, as well, that like you say, Pamela, this is not new. I think some of the theories behind some of the newer models that has been released now, I think I heard some of the theories were basically from the 70s or something like that. But we never had computers that were strong enough to do what they're doing today. And I would say for us as well, it's of course also a matter of what can we realistically do. And we do our own models. We don't, for instance, Carlos and I already talked about that. We're not going to do that for generative AI for creating images, like the Midjourney or the Stable and so on. And I guess if you read some of the news about how they did this and the kind of investments they got, it's clear that you need hundreds of millions to do something like that. But what I think is super interesting is that some of these models are right now being released as open source models that you can use by yourself. Mm-hmm. You can there's a way. It's basically, you could say it's the same as training an AI, called fine tuning, but it's you do it with a model that's already trained, and then you use maybe your specific images or your specific data from your area, much smaller amount, to send it in a certain direction. And I think stuff like this is something we are also looking at. So because it needs to be doable as well, we can't invest $100 million into training an AI. We don't have that kind of
But
resource.
you mentioned a really good point, Janus. Is our AI is really focused on fashion, right? On exactly what our customers need. So it's not like Midjourney or DALL-E. They're a really good one, of course, but they're training different kinds of images. Our models are really trained to a specific retouching step, so they are really specialized. That's the reason we achieve these levels of confidence, or we can really use it on such a speed workflow that we have.
Yeah, and I think that's a good point, Carlos, and that's also why we're still using our own mask and not using mask from someone else. As I said, we test them out every now and then. Often in these tests, we'll also test with some images we just shot with our iPhone or whatever, some images people got from Instagram or something like that. And our AI is always underperforming on those. But then on the other hand, when you have models that are shot in a studio, if you have products that are shot in a professional setting, so far our models have always been better than what we have tested. So you're very right, Carlos. Our model is made for our purpose and with that focus.
Yeah.
All right, guys. Somehow we have blown through the time. We might have to do part 2 to get into more AI topic.
I think we do.
But my internet is not stable, but we're here. Yeah, we might have to do part 2 to get deeper into some of the other AI topics. But we're going to take to the Q&A and see if we have any questions we can answer quickly. All right, this is from Angela. How do companies clip out 300 plus product images in a matter of a couple hours? Is that the masking using AI mentioned?
Now you say companies, I can tell you how we do it at Pixelz. So that is very much using that AI. We can't scale fast enough up and down to match that kind of work with human labor. So, but because out of those 300 today, 75 to 80% of those would get a perfect mask from our AI. So that means we only need to work on the remaining part, and basically, and then we do also have quite a lot of scale. We have quite a lot of people working for us doing the retouching. So even and a lot of our clients maybe need the images next morning. If we then get like we have something we call flow production, which is super fast production with the images. We also have a feature called expedite, where you ask to get it back super fast. If someone asks for that, our system will automatically, that's again where the complexity scoring comes in, but it will reorder the whole workflow that we have in front of us and make sure those images gets the highest priority. And thereby we'll have, in a matter of maybe a minute after we get an order like that, we'll have maybe 30 people, 40 people, 50 people working on those images. But definitely the AI and the automation is a huge part of that. And we see in general very big fluctuations from day to day. If we didn't have the computers to do a lot of that work, we couldn't handle those fluctuations. But luckily the computers we can turn on and off and just more or less scale as much as we like.
And then Angela says, very cool, thanks. She's been calling it magic. It is. How about from Nathan, is AI color matching happening via hex values or image recognition or both?
Do you want to take that one, Carlos?
You can correct me if I'm wrong on the technicalities, but first we need to identify which garment needs to be color match, right? And I think that's done with an automation and human interaction at the same time, kind of selecting which garment. Then it's AI doing the masking, and there is I think color sampling and trying to I don't know if it's hex or RGB or trying to match this color, but it's not only one color, right? It's the whole gradient of lights and shadows. So it's a combination of different things: human, then automation, then AI, and then another automation.
And often the reference color is also an image. So like you say, it's not just one value, it's several.
Mhm.
But yeah.
Exactly.
And then again, a very important piece, we do have human quality assurance. So there is people looking at it. They will see the reference file or the color, hex color next to the image, and we have different tools so they can easily compare. So again, once in a while the AI is not hitting the right colors, then we'll do it with manpower instead.
All right. This might have to be our last question of the day, but we will try and answer, I think, the other questions in some other form. Maybe we'll put those out on LinkedIn. So if you don't follow us over on LinkedIn, we'll try and get some answers out to you. Last question, are you offering to integrate a product into an AI-generated environment? For example, I give you a photo of a sofa and you generate a living room that fits well in lights and perspective with the image.
I'm exploring that particular product. Of course, I need to find the use case or a problem, right, that our fashion customers will have and will need us to solve. But we're already seeing how we can use this for elevating images. So you shoot a product on a white or plain background in your studio in different poses, and you want one of them to be placed outside, as it was an editorial that you shoot on the streets of Barcelona, for example. So yes, we're looking into this.
Yeah, I think an interesting part of that, Carlos, is also that, at least in our experience and our tests, the AIs again are not ready to do this. They're not able to match, for instance, the lighting or there's many things that if you just combine a product and a generated background or generated environment, it feels strange, right? But what we're also seeing is that once you add a human to that, again, if you generate all of this and then give it to a human who will adjust maybe the lighting, maybe some of the colors, maybe remove some strange text that it was generated, whatever, then all of a sudden we are able to get really good results.
Exactly. Hybrid approach again.
I've got the go ahead for another question. We've been approved for another question. How about this one? What tools do you recommend photographers use during the shoot and file prep before they send images to Pixelz? I actually have a follow-up question. AI tools or just general tools? That was
I will say of course, we try to create our product so it works for everyone and kind of any situation. I actually don't think we have many clients right now who do any special prep work. Often, maybe what we see is we'll maybe get some metadata, maybe file naming will give us some information about the images, and we can use that to make sure it goes through the right steps in the SAW process. And then, as I mentioned, we also have, for instance, this flow production. And the basic idea behind that is that if we can get the images in the flow, as you shoot them, you send them off to Pixelz, we can also process them in the flow and get them back to you. I think now we have clients where we're doing this, where we're getting them back in 2 hours. And basically, our whole idea behind that, the way we built our system is a flow system, and it works in flow. And there's many benefits to that. That could be another webinar, but there is tools out there that will help you work in flow. That is actually flow tools for a photo studio. And definitely, if you need to get quick to market, those are fantastic tools to use.
And I could imagine a tool.
Name drop.
I could imagine a tool that it does not exist, or I don't know that exists, but you take this Stable Diffusion, as you mentioned, or one of these that offer an API in open source, and you give it your previously selected images for, like, I don't know, the last month, and then it can help you select the images of your shoot today, right? Because it's trained on what you selected before, and will help you skim through all the images that you shot, maybe 50 per outfit, and select the best 5, and then you only have to narrow it down to 1. So that could be a tool.
Yeah, and I believe, Brett, if you're watching, I think we host these flow events a few times a year. There was a speaker at our flow event in Berlin earlier this year that spoke about naming, and I think he may have used an AI tool. Hopefully we can find that session for you and maybe share it somewhere. So whoever was at, Brett, you were asking for that, we'll try and find it for you and get it to you somehow.
There's a whole list of great companies out there. A lot of them join us in Flow as well, that work more in the you could say before us in the studio space. And I think there's lots of fantastic software for that as well. And yeah, I have seen studios really become efficient using those tools.
All right. Well, we are going to save all of these questions because there are some really great questions in here, and maybe they'll be a part 2, or we'll send out some answers over on LinkedIn. So if you don't follow us there, go find us on LinkedIn, and we'll try and get some of these questions answered. And then everyone will be receiving a recording of the webinar whenever this is done, in an email with some other resources for you about AI. So thank you all so much for joining us today. And thank you, Janus and Carlos.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for joining us.
Bye.